Good afternoon, friends. The Honorable Finance Minister has presented the interim budget for the year 2014-15 in the Parliament earlier today. The Finance Minister is here with his team to talk about the budget and also to answer your questions. I'd request you to check that your cell phones are switched off or are in the silent mode before we begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm sure all of you have had an opportunity to read the budget speech as well as the supporting documents. And I assume you've had an opportunity to look at the numbers. So I shan't make any long opening statement so that we can leave enough time for questions. Because it is an interim budget, it is limited by time and space. There are also limitations of conventions. Keeping all that in mind, the speech focuses on a few important things which needed to be said, and I've tried my best to say that in a manner that average people reading the speech will understand what we are trying to do and what we have done over the last 2 years. We have put the economy on a more stable foundation. As I said in paragraph 15, the fiscal deficit is declining, the current account deficit has been contained, inflation has moderated, the quarterly growth rate is on the rise, the exchange rate is stable, exports have increased, and hundreds of projects have been cleared. That clearly indicates that the economy is more stable and will be able to withstand any shocks if there are any. The second point that I wish to make was, look at what we have done over the last 21 months in 2012-13 and the 9 months of 2013-14. These are listed from paragraphs 22 onwards, and I'm sure you have looked at them. The third thing I wanted to say was, look at the record of the UPA government over the last 10 years. It is but natural for a finance minister presenting the last budget of the term of this government to look back over 5 years or 10 years. Since the UPA has been in office for 10 years, I naturally look back at 10 years and pick some examples to show that notwithstanding what some people may say, the country has made significant progress. I've also pointed out that in the 10-year period, even if you break it down into 2 5-year periods, the trend growth rate in this 5-year and 5 years is higher than the trend growth rate of 33 years. In fact, that is the most significant statement in the budget speech. The trend growth rate over 33 years is 6.2%. Between 1999 and 2004, the government delivered 5.9%. Between 2004 and 2009, government delivered 8.4%. And despite our difficulties since 2009, in the period 2009 to 2014, we are delivering 6.6%. I think people can draw their own conclusions of how growth has been pushed. The next point I wish to make was that we are providing enough for our government's initiatives in the social sector. Every flagship program has been given adequate funds. None of the key ministries has been given money less than what was given in 2013-14. It's either equal to or more than what was given in 2013-14. We've also outlined what any government should do. There is a whole lot of reforms that require to be done in the financial sector. And then there are a number of steps that have to be taken to take the economy forward. These have been noted from paragraph 58 onwards, and more particularly from paragraph 70 onwards. I think the 10 tasks that I have outlined are the tasks which no government can ignore. No government ought to ignore. There has to be bipartisan, multi-partisan support for these 10 tasks. It is these 10 tasks, if performed well, that will take India's economy to a higher rank. And I'm aiming at taking India's economy to the 3rd rank only after the US and China. That's doable. Any responsible, determined, progressive, proactive government can deliver on that goal. And finally, on the revenue side, as I said, we are bound by the limitations of convention, so we have not changed any direct tax rates. That's for the next government to do. But some things cannot brook any delay. Therefore, we have announced changes in the excise rates in respect of goods under Chapter 84, Chapter 85. We've announced changes in excise rates for the automobile industry and some other items which I mentioned in the speech. It will entail a small loss of revenue for the remaining, say, 40 days of this year, and some loss of revenue in the month of April and May. But if sales pick up, if the market picks up, if they're able to sell more, much of that loss can be recovered by additional sales. And then the government, when it presents its regular budget, can review what it wants to do about the rates that were announced today. I want to conclude by saying that India is one of the handful of countries which is able to keep its head above the water. A 5% growth rate masks what is happening. Q1 of 2013-14 recorded a growth rate of 4.4%. That was the, in my view, the low point of the downward cycle. Q2 registered a growth of 4.8%. If for the whole year CSO is predicting 4.9%, it's a matter of simple arithmetic that Q3 and Q4 must deliver at least 5.2% for the 6-month period. So 4.4, 4.8, and taking the 2 quarters together, 5.2, in my view, shows that there is a mild upturn. Now the effort must be to ensure that this upturn remains an upturn and we climb from 5.2 towards our goal of 6% in 2014-15. It's doable, but it's doable only if the fiscal foundations are strong, which is why I emphasize on reducing fiscal deficit, containing the current account deficit, moderating inflation, encouraging capital flows, quickening the process of implementation of projects, and a number of other reforms in the financial sector because the financial sector is to support the real economy. So these reforms are absolutely necessary, and they have to be done by any government. So with that, I'll stop and we'll take a few questions.
Thank you, sir. Let's begin from this side. Yes, please. Surabhi.
What's her name?
Sir, Surabhi from the Indian Express. Two questions, sir.
No, let's do one at a time. There are too many people. Let me come back.
Okay. Sir, the effective revenue deficit, sir, there's a variance between the figures for the budget estimate for 2013-14 and what is there in the revised estimate. Can you explain why, the reason behind it, sir?
What you're trying to say is that the effective revenue deficit in the BE was 1.8 and in the RE is 2.2. Well, I'm not very happy about the way effective revenue deficit is calculated. I'm told that ministries still have a problem classifying expenditure as revenue expenditure or capital expenditure. The tendency is to report less capital expenditure. And therefore, this is not a good figure on which we can peg any policy decisions. It was introduced a few years ago. Therefore, I have not deleted that line. Let it remain there. But I think unless there is better classification of what is capital expenditure and what is revenue expenditure, I think calculations of effective revenue deficit will remain imperfect calculations.
Chidambaram, I'm Manas Banerjee from Doinik Agrodut, Assam. You have said that 1,200 crores have been set aside additionally for Northeast, Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. But you didn't elaborate it. Then which state will get how much and in which account it will be spent?
This is additional central assistance. When the Planning Commission approves the state plan, the states demand ACA, additional central assistance. Planning Commission says, we'll see later. No promises are made. When this was brought to my notice, I said, yes, we'll see by the end of the year. If there are resources, we will give it to these states. Usually these states run short of cash in the months of February and March. Therefore, I said we'll look at it in February. Now, we have about 1,200 crores which we can spare, and this will be divided among the northeastern states, which are 7, plus Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. The division will be done in consultation with the Planning Commission and in the light of the demands made by the Chief Ministers. But the pie is 1,200. It will be divided among these states.
Yes, Badri.
Sir Badrinath, your non-plan expenses are over 12,000 crores, sir. And you have continuously last 2 years cut the plan expenses. In essence, the capital expenditure has been pruned. Does it serve well for the Indian economy? And secondly, the subsidy figures are not
one question,
matching,
please.
sir.
Please, sir, one question. Please. As I said in my speech, we over-provide in many departments and ministries. There are any number of examples I can pull out from past years where we over-provide for departments and ministries in the hope that they will spend. We also over-provide in the hope that the economy will grow at, as we did this year, between 6.1 and 6.7, as predicted by the RBI and by the economics division at that time. But when growth is lower and ministries and departments are unable to spend for one reason or another, there are savings. The rule about savings was not made by me this year. The rule about savings is an old rule. It says if you do not spend 2/3 of the budgeted amount by December 31, you can only spend 1/3 of the budgeted amount in the last quarter. That's an old rule. So once we apply that rule on the 31st of December, there are savings in every ministry. From my point of view, they are savings. You may call it cut in expenditure, but I regard them as savings. But we are not squirreling away those savings in some secret account. That is being spent elsewhere. If you look at total expenditure, in a total expenditure of 15,90,434 crore, the reduction in expenditure, net reduction in total expenditure, is only 75,000 crore. So, in a budget which intended to spend 15,90,434 crore, we are not spending 75,000 crore. According to me, that has no major impact on the economy. Besides, to the extent that revenues have not been collected, that money is still with the people of India, and they will spend. It will not be spent through the government, but they will spend. So I don't think the reduction in total expenditure is so significant as to make out a case that it will impact economic growth.
Yes, please.
Sir, Ragini Verma from Mint. So if you could give us an understanding of the revenue foregone on account of the excise duty cuts that you've announced today. And also if you could comment on the timing of the excise duty cuts, because the manufacturing sector has been suppressed for almost a year, and the industry feels had these cuts been announced some months back, especially like the auto sector, it would have helped stem some of the slowdown that they've seen.
Well, what might have been is might have been. We can't now look at what might have been. We hope that the economy will pick up. In fact, our estimate was that the economy will grow in the second quarter. That expectation has come partially true. The economy has picked up in the second quarter from 4.4% in the first quarter to 4.8% in the second quarter. But that pickup in growth has not been even across sectors. There is smart growth in some sectors. Exports have grown smartly. But in the automobile sector, in capital goods, in consumer non-durables, the growth remains very sluggish. In fact, there is negative growth in some of these sectors. And when the figures for the first and second quarter are available, especially when the second quarter figures are available, and then we look at the January numbers, we decided that we have to make some changes as far as excise duty concerned for these sectors. That's how these changes have been made. Unfortunately, our reporting is not on real time. Our reporting comes with a lag. Therefore, decisions can only be taken based on data. Without data, you cannot take decisions. Now, what is the revenue loss? I don't know. If more of you buy more cars and more scooters, there may be no revenue loss at all. There will be a notional revenue loss if the level of sales remains the same and the rates are cut. But if the level of sales improves, so what you have lost in the rates, you will pick up in the volumes. So some of it will be recovered. Very difficult to estimate what the revenue loss will be, but I would say in the next 40 days, we'll probably lose about 300 or 400 crore. But it could smartly pick up thereafter.
Yes, sir.
अच्छा मैं लक्ष्मण राय CNBC आवाज से आपने इसमें स्टेटमेंट में बोला है कि करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट $45 बिलियन रहेगा, जो कि पहले के इनिशियल टारगेट्स भी काफ़ी कम है. इसके बावजूद आपने गोल्ड पे इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी में कोई कट नहीं किया. क्या हम लोग और CAD कम होने का इंतजार कर रहे हैं, या फिर नेक्स्ट फिस्कल में देखेंगे, या फिर अभी जो बाकी के 40 डेज बाकी इसमें कोई रिडक्शन देख सकते हैं गोल्ड पे इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी?
I have explained this several times in the past. India, a developing country at this stage of development, cannot, and I repeat, cannot afford to import gold for $50 billion or $60 billion. That is simply beyond our means. And the people of India must understand that every ounce of gold is imported. Every ounce of gold is paid for in foreign exchange. What happened in April and May 2013 presented a frightening prospect. 302 tons of gold came in those 2 months. If gold imports had continued at the same rate, we would have ended with 1,800 tons of gold. 50% more than what China is importing this year. Can India afford to import 1,800 tons of gold? Therefore, gold import restrictions were absolutely necessary. It was that restrictions were placed in the interest of India, the interest of India's economic health. Those restrictions have indeed played a part in containing the current account deficit. But equally, the rise in exports of 6.3% has played a part. Equally, the mobilization of foreign exchange by the RBI and the government acting in tandem on the FCNRB account and some other relaxations played a part. Therefore, there were a number of other steps which were taken to augment the inflow of foreign exchange. The gold import restrictions restricted the outflow of foreign exchange. The interplay of all these factors has helped us contain the current account deficit to less than 1/2 of last year. Can India afford an $88 billion current account deficit year after year after year? I have not come across anyone anywhere in the country who says $88 billion is affordable by India. We have therefore now estimated that it will be $45 billion. But with luck, who knows, I might do even better than $45 billion.
Yes.
Supriya Srinath from ET Now. You've managed to curtail the fiscal deficit to below your targeted levels of 4.8%. I'm sure you're a happy man. How satisfied are you with the quality of fiscal adjustment that has been made?
I've explained to you, on the plan side, expenditure has been cut, or there are savings of about 80,000 crore rupees. On the non-plan side, there is an extra expenditure of about 5,000 crore rupees. So that's the net expenditure reduction, 75,000 crore rupees. Yes, it's not good to say that there are savings of 75,000 net, but if you look at the total expenditure, 15,90,434, 75,000 represents about 5%. Now, in a expenditure size of 15,90,000, I don't think 75,000 will impact so much on growth as some people fear. And as I've also said, to the extent that revenues projected have not been collected, that money remains with the people and they will spend.
So this is Suchetna from ET Now. Sir, here. You're working with a target of a nominal GDP growth of 13.4%. Would you term it as a little ambitious?
I think at the beginning of the year, every finance minister must be ambitious, must take some risks. If you set your targets too low, you will achieve even lower than that. So I wouldn't call it ambitious. I say that's the pragmatic approach to budget making. You will have to set a target. You know the famous statement, your reach must be beyond your grasp. You must always set a reach that is beyond the grasp so that an extra effort can be made. So we have set a target, but this is based on CSO numbers. This is based on data available. We want to grow at that rate. Let us see.
Sir, this is Shishir from Hindu Business Line. You have provided 500 crore rupees for one rank 1 pension scheme. What is the estimated expenditure for full financial year on this kind of scheme, sir?
See, I have gone by data provided by the Ministry of Defence. As I said, much of the gap has been closed in 3 decisions taken in 2006, 2010 and 2013. The last of them was based on a cabinet secretary headed committee. So the gap is really pretty much closed, especially for the 4 ranks that I mentioned. Havildar, Nayak Subedar, Subedar and Subedar Major, the gap is practically closed. The gap is in the next 2 ranks in the OR category and in the ranks of the officers. So the Defence Ministry has estimated that in 2014-15, apart from the usual money provided for salary, pensions, etc., we may require another 500 crore. Now, if they had asked me for another 1,000 crore, I would have provided the 1,000 crore rupees. They said, we think it will be about 500 crore. So I said, fine, we'll provide you 500 crore. But let me make it very clear. That decision has been made. It is now OROP, one rank, one pension. If that requires in 2014-15 a little more than 500 crore, that money will be found or will be provided. And please also remember that in the defense budget, we have given a 10% increase from 2,03,672 crore to 2,24,000 crore. Money is fungible. So if they require money, they will go into their full budget. But this 500 crore is an addition. But enough money has been provided. I think in any event, enough money will be provided so that OROP is implemented in 2014-15.
Yes, sir. Sir, Kanksha Sethi from CNBC. Sir, at several occasions in the past, you've said that the fiscal stimulus given to industry during the crisis wasn't required, yet today excise duty has been decreased, and this comes at a time when expenditure, if you discount for inflation, is actually going to see flat growth in the next fiscal, and also the subsidy on account of the hike in the gas price from KG Basin is not reflecting in the power and fertilizer subsidy. And at that time you said it'd be worked out, but one hasn't seen the government commit to anything on that, and again today in the budget numbers you don't see that reflecting.
Well, I don't know what the question is. You've just made a number of statements.
No, sir,
but let's...
My question is that why has the excise duty been reduced
I'll
despite the fact that...
You cannot compare the excise duty reductions announced by me today with the stimulus packages. Both had different purposes. The stimulus package was to ensure that the turbulence in the world economy does not affect India, and that our growth rate is anchored at around 7 or 8%. That was a large stimulus package, what the US calls unconventional monetary policy. We therefore decided to spend money. We borrowed money and spent money. That was that stimulus package. Today what we are saying is, these are specific sectors of industry which are experiencing difficulty. Growth is very sluggish. You have to pay us this tax. All right. We give you a concession in the tax. Pay us a little less, but hopefully you can sell more. We are not borrowing and spending. We are simply saying we will take from you less tax in the hope that volumes will make up for the reduction in tax rates. So I don't think the two packages are comparable. Qualitatively, they're not comparable. In terms of size of the package, they're not comparable. I'm talking about losing 300 to 400 crores in 40 days, and in April and May, perhaps we will lose about 700 to 800 crore. But as I said, much of that can be made up if there is even a 5% increase in sales. So I don't think the two are comparable.
Minister Krishnan from Bloomberg News. In your speech, you've listed out 10 points that the government of day should focus on. Point number 3, you talk about how a developing economy and an economy like India, where we are aiming for high growth, you will have a moderate level of inflation. And there seems to be a piece of advice to the RBI to strike a balance between growth and inflation. Is there a contradiction in their stand right now?
None whatsoever. In the US, the mandate to the Federal Reserve is price stability and employment. In many European countries, the mandate is price stability and employment. In many developing countries, the mandate is price stability and growth. The RBI is an autonomous monetary authority, but ultimately the direction in which a country must go and the pace at which the country must grow are determined by an elected government. We have the RBI Act, which talks about monetary stability. Monetary stability is impacted both by price stability and by low or high growth. Therefore, we have said from a developing country's point of view, the policy should be to strike a balance between price stability and growth. In fact, I can cite you passages of Governor RBI statement where he also emphasizes that while price stability is a foremost objective, the RBI cannot be oblivious to the needs of growth. There's no contradiction. We have said nothing different. We have simply articulated it more forcefully on an appropriate occasion.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chidambaram, Rajiv Sharma, right for first post. If you were to describe this interim budget 2014-15 in one word, what will it be? I will suggest, I can give you three suggestions: pragmatic, populist, please all. And also, if you could give a figure, a ballpark figure, how many people will be benefiting from OROP? Thank you.
Your question is populist, and you expect a populist answer. My intention was not to please anyone. My intention was to speak plainly to the people of India and tell them that these are turbulent years. We are navigating through a turbulent period. We have done a lot in the last 21 months to stabilize India's economy. And we believe that we have achieved a fair measure of success as we see Q1 growth at 4.4 become Q2 growth of 4.8, promising to become 5.2 in Q3 and Q4. And therefore, in one word, what this budget says is, it sends out a clear signal of hope to the people of India that things will be better.
The number of people benefiting
one
from
rank, one pension. OROP. Well, I don't know. Everybody in the defense services will be benefited because this is from the lowest rank to the highest rank. OROP is what it is. All retirees in all ranks will be benefited. So I don't have immediately the number of ex-servicemen in the Defense Ministry, but I'm sure the Defense Ministry has the number.
Yes, the lady there, please, at the corner.
How much is the rollover of subsidies, basically three major subsidies, food, oil and fertilizer, to the next financial year? And secondly, on your tax collections, you have projected a growth of about 19% again this year and next year. And this year you are falling short of the target. So what gives you the optimism that you will achieve 19% growth next year?
There is no rollover except under one head. The rollover is only in fuel subsidy. Last year and the year before that also, Q4 subsidy is rolled over to Q1 of the next year. That's not unusual. Q4 last year was 45,000 crore, which I absorbed in Q1 of 2013-14. So technically, I'm entitled to roll over 45,000 crore, but I'm rolling over only 35,000 crore. I'm prepaying 10,000 crore. If the rollover from this year to the next year is 10,000 crore rupees less than what was rolled over from last year to this year. Yes. Your other question is about tax collection. Answer to what question of Suchetna. Your reach must be beyond your grasp. If I do not set high targets for my boards, the achievement will not be high. Therefore, I set high targets. I push them to do a drive. Look at our tax GDP ratio. Our tax GDP ratio is still very low. It touched a high of 11.9% in 2007-8. But at the moment, the tax GDP ratio today is only 10.2%. Therefore, if we must improve the tax GDP ratio, we must collect more taxes. While the large number of people are honest and law-abiding and pay their small taxes, there are a number of people who do not pay their taxes. Therefore, the boards are being pushed to collect the taxes. Same answer I gave to Suchetna is the answer to your question also.
Yes, Deepshika, please.
So you've outlined measures to deepen Indian financial markets. Could you elaborate on these measures, especially revamp of ADR, GDR, and smoother clearing and settlement for international investors?
Well, I could, but these are technical subjects. It requires longer explanation. My suggestion is that you meet with Secretary Economic Affairs and Additional Secretary Economic Affairs, and I will ask them to give you brief notes on each one of these items. It won't interest most of our friends here. It certainly won't interest the viewers.
Yes, please, the lady here. Just 1 minute, Sapna. The lady behind you. I'll
Sir,
come.
capital infusion in public sector banks is coming down year after year from 20,000 crore to 14 to 11. So are you signaling that the PSBs should raise their own capital, and are they able to in these times?
Yes, I am signaling that it is good corporate and business practice to be able to raise your own capital. I've said a few days ago in a speech I delivered at an Indian Overseas Bank function that one of the claims on the net profits of a bank is that you must put aside a significant part of it for additional capital. Banking, unlike other industries, and let me repeat it, banking, unlike other industries, requires capital every year. I can set up a steel plant and not put in more capital, say for 3, 4, 5 years. The steel plant will still run at the same capacity, producing the same amount of steel. But banking, if you have to grow your business, if you even want to take one step forward, you need additional capital. Because there are provisioning requirements, capital requirements. Therefore, banking is a very special business where additional capital is required every year. And therefore, banks, boards of banks, employees of banks must recognize that a significant part of the earnings must be put aside as capital. So I would urge banks to raise their own capital. There are various kinds of capital, tier 1, tier 2, etc. They should raise capital. Government, of course, will provide whatever it can afford to provide. What we have provided is what we have budgeted now, but this is an interim budget. It is in the regular budget you will get a full picture of what government can provide as additional capital.
So,
yes,
this side. So, Dheeraj Tiwari from the Economic Times. You are the only ministry who are pushing for the residual stake sale in Balco and Hindustan Zinc, in spite of all the CBI inquiries and everything. But somehow, in the revised estimate, from 14,000 crore, it has been to put at 3,000 crore. So shall we understand that Hindustan Zinc and Balco are off the list, at least for this fiscal?
Well, I have recused myself from Balco and Hindustan Zinc. The minister in charge is Mr. Kapil Sibal, but I will ask Secretary Economic Affairs to answer the question.
Actually, the decision to disinvest in both Hindustan Zinc and Balco stands. But there is a process that has to be followed, and our estimation was that that process may not be completed in this year. I'll repeat. Can you hear me now?
No, don't mix up the two, please.
That decision to disinvest in Balco and Hindustan Zinc stands. The process which is required to be gone through before disinvestment can happen is a process that takes some time. In our estimation, it would not be completed before 31st March this year. Therefore, we have kept adequate provision for receipts from the sale of the stocks in these two companies for the next year.
As far as Axis Bank is concerned, the process is underway. I expect the process to be completed before 31st of March, and the revenues will come in this year.
Yes, please.
Pradeep Kumar. Question is, your word is very nice, economy will grow. The question is, forthcoming election, the Indians will vote the UPA. So what the scenario I fail to understand. Fiscal deficit, import bill, export bill, food security. Is it the enough clear picture for the voters?
And I don't understand your question. I was presenting an interim budget. What I will tell the voters will come in the election manifesto.
Okay, fine. The question is the fiscal deficit is only the problem. It is coming every year, fiscal deficit. Last 10 years, it has not been improved. That's the question, as well as the import and export bill also.
I think your facts are wrong. Fiscal deficit came down to 2.5% in 2007-8. I think you should go back and refresh your facts.
Yes, please, at the back.
Mr. Chidambaram, I am Rakesh Kapoor from Punjab Kesari, your favorite newspaper. On the lighter side, my question is that you yourself conceded in your budget speech that it is the agriculture sector which has provided cushion to the Indian economy. But instead of giving more incentives to agriculture sector, you have provided fillip to manufacturing sector. That is my question. I hope you understand my English. This is a Meerut College boy, village boy English.
That is wrong. That is wrong because we have done more in agriculture than any other government, which is reflected in the production. For example, agricultural credit for the current year was fixed at 7 lakh crore rupees. It will exceed that amount. It will be 7,35,000 crore rupees. MSP that we give today is twice as much as it was in 2004. We provide far more quality seeds than was ever anticipated or planned. Therefore, a number of incentives have been given to agriculture. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. The incentives we have given to agriculture has resulted in growth rising to 4.6% in the current year and bumper harvest not only in food grains but other commodities that I mentioned in my speech. This government, I'm proud to say, has given the maximum support to agriculture. If you have any further doubt on that, I suggest you meet the Minister of Agriculture and he will endorse every word that I've said.
Siddharth, you had a question?
The next year's disinvestment target include the Sooty stake sale? I mean, if you could explain the huge jump in the disinvestment receipts that you've budgeted for?
As Secretary Economic Affairs explained, they have taken receipts from 2 residual stakes into next year, which explains the large jump from this year to next year. We are selling only a part of Sooty's stake in Axis Bank this year. Whether the other part will be sold next year, it's too early to say. But if you followed the Secretary Economic Affairs' answer carefully, the amount that is expected from the residual stake sale in 2 companies boosts the non-tax revenues of next year.
Yes, please.
Hi, sir. This is Rajesh from Reuters. One question on gold imports. Now that current account deficit has come down and it looks very much in control, is the government planning to ease some of the curves by way of reducing the import duty on gold imports or relaxing the 80-20 norms?
See, I can't make any announcement when Parliament is in session. There are pros and cons to relaxing the restrictions. We will weigh them carefully and take a decision. But surely you're not suggesting that I should allow gold imports to rise and the current account deficit to balloon. So we have to keep in mind the goal is to contain the current account deficit at a level where it can be safely and fully financed. Keeping that goal in mind, if anything can be done, we'll certainly look into it. But the operative word is we will look into it.
Yes, Sapna, please. Just use the mic.
Sapna Das from Cogensis. On the GDC bill, you mentioned that you're going to put out a fresh version, apparently, on the website Because, you know, the previous bill has undergone a couple of changes. There are various versions to that now. So
there is no fresh version.
So is this going to be the DDC bill 2013, or, I mean, how do we look at it?
What we are going to put out is the bill as introduced in Parliament, together with the official amendments that have been drafted. So we'll put them out as separate parts of what we put out. So you'll know what the bill that was introduced. It went to standing committee, it came back. The ministry has drafted some official amendments. We're going to put out those official amendments too. So when you read the original bill with the official amendments, you will know the thinking of the ministry.
Yes, please.
Despite failing in achieving the disinvestment target, for this year you have put a disinvestment target of almost 37,000 crore. 37,000 crore. So how you are going to achieve that? Do you feel that in the coming year markets will improve, or market will have a better appetite for divestment?
Department of Disinvestment has a list of companies in which we can disinvest. And they have gone by the prevailing market prices, the timetable required, the expectation of what can be done and what cannot be done. Based on that data, they have estimated that it is possible to raise about 36,925 crore from disinvesting in government PSUs. Now we have to go through a process of consultation. We'll have to consult the ministry concerned, then take it to the empowered group of ministers, then take it to the CCA. There could be one or two which don't materialize. But equally there could be one or two which is not in the list which could materialize. These are estimates made. As I said, when at the beginning of the year you have to make estimates based on whatever data is available to you and aim to achieve it.
Yes, please.
You spoke about offshore illegal accounts. What is the status of the investigation, and what is the quantum of money involved with 69 cases you mentioned, and will there be any tax notice issued by the Finance Ministry?
I thought I've said all that I have to say. I've said in paragraph 75 that in 67 cases we have information, action is underway, the tax liability will be determined, and wherever the law requires, penalties will be imposed. You can't, unless the process is completed, unless the assessment is made. I can't tell you what the quantum will be. It is for the department to assess and impose the tax liability and the penalty. In 17 other cases, prosecutions have been launched. Once the assessment is made, people will go on appeal. Then the appellate authority has to take a view. At this stage, it's difficult to put a number. All that we are trying to say is, this exercise was started in 2011. It has gathered pace in 2013. We faced numerous obstacles. Even now, we have virtually no cooperation from a country like Switzerland. But we are trying to get information through special efforts and through alternative methods.
Yes. Sir, despite fiscal deficit projected to despite fiscal deficit projected to decline drastically, why are market borrowings rising so fast by 47,000 crore? Is it because of high interest rates, or are you preponing some repayments?
The bulk of the fiscal deficit is because of the interest payment. If you look at a budget at a glance, in the revised estimates for the current year, the fiscal deficit is 5,24,539 crore rupees. Of this, interest alone is rupees 3,80,066 crore. That represents a little over 72% of the fiscal deficit. Interest rates are high, borrowing cost is high, and therefore interest payments go up, and therefore that is getting reflected in the fiscal deficit. If interest rates come down, If interest payments are lower, to that extent, fiscal deficit can be lower.
Yes,
but that's not the only part of fiscal deficit. The bulk of the fiscal deficit is represented by interest payments.
सर, मैं नीरज ठाकुर हूं जी न्यूज से। वन रैंक वन पेंशन एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण डिसीजन है और ये काफी पुरानी डिमांड है, लेकिन क्या ये महज कोइंसिडेंस है कि 2 दिन पहले राहुल गांधी ने डिमांड उठाई और आज इसको पूरा कर दिया गया चुनावों को ध्यान में रख के?
The budget speech was written several days ago, and if the Vice President of the party cannily anticipated it, I congratulate him.
Yes, Elizabeth, please. Piche, last row, please.
Sir, in your opening remarks, you mentioned, about the UPA's commitment to the social sector. Now, coming to the health sector, I was just wondering, there seem to be some critical cuts in, critical sectors. For example, cancer care, non-communicable diseases, etc. So, given the commitment of the UPA government, especially when you talk about, in the 12th five-year plan, has there been a cut given inflation?
No, I can't answer details of the allocation in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. That will require me to have the expenditure budget statements in front of me and go through line by line. Those are best answered by the Health Minister and the Health Secretary and other officials of the Ministry of Health. I can only give you the overview. And we have provided for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, as I said in my budget speech, a sum of rupees 33,725 crore, which is substantial and adequate. But how that money has been allocated to different programs, I request you to put the question to the Minister of Health and Family Welfare.
Yes, Supreme.
You decided to continue with the 10% surcharge on super rich. What was the rationale to do so? Because it would have come to an end this fiscal.
So you must try to understand how the finance bill is constructed. There's a part 1, there's a part 2 and a part 3. Part 1, when it is presented on February 28, 2013, prescribes the rates for the assessment year 2013-14, but that is borrowed from part 3 of the previous finance bill. Part 3 of the previous year's finance bill gets reflected in part 1 of the current year's finance bill. Well, I'm sure I've lost you, but you have to take my word for it. I've done this long enough to know what I'm talking about. Part 2 is a TDS, February 2013 finance bill. When it talks about TDS, that applies to the financial year 2013-14, assessment year 14-15. Part 3 is the advance tax. That applies again to financial year 13-14, assessment year 14-15. So part 3 of Finance Bill 2013 is copied into part 1 of Finance Bill 2014. So that will apply. The part 3 of Finance Bill 2013 ought to be amended this year, but this is the interim budget. I can't amend it. I have left it there. It will be amended when the regular budget is presented.
Sir, on the
And I'm sure I've made no sense to anyone, but that's okay. All the chartered accountants understand it. All the tax consultants understand it. Advance tax, the first installment is payable on June 15, 2014. Before that, there will be a government and there will be a regular budget. So if you're paying advance tax, don't worry.
Sir, on education loan, you said that you'll provide a moratorium for students who have taken loans between 2009 and 2013, and borrowers will have to start paying from 2014, 1st April 2014. Can you elaborate? They have to pay the same interest rate, or how does it work?
No, nothing has changed. The contract remains the same. The principal amount, the interest, all that remains the same. Those who borrowed prior to 31/3/2009, the vast majority have completed their studies because this average is between 4 and 5 years, 3 to 4.5 years. They have all completed their studies, except a few who may have some more subjects to pass. Most of them have completed their studies. During the period of study, they must have paid interest. They may have defaulted in some installments. Some of them may have even paid the principal partly. Some of them may have principal outstanding. Since the interest concession has been given to borrowers after 1/4/2009, what we are saying is, if there is any outstanding interest, mark my words, if there is any outstanding interest on the loan you took, as on 31/12/2013, I am willing to take over that interest burden. You don't have to pay that interest up to 31/12/2013. We think, our calculations show, 2,600 crore rupees is outstanding interest as on 31/12/2013. We are wiping out that burden from the shoulders of the families. We are taking over the burden. But from 1/1/2014, of course, if the principal amount is outstanding, they will have to pay interest. But this is a huge relief to 9 lakh families. I assume that when I say it applies to the whole of India, it will apply to every state of India. Why are you raising this doubt? They were not talking about the moratorium that we have announced on education loans. They were talking about some other demand.
Yes, please.
Sir, under the head financial market, para 66, you have given the vision to create one record for all financial assets for every individual. What does that mean, sir?
This was a decision taken in the FSDC meeting. The details are being worked out by the FSDC committee. This means that, like there is a securities depository, NSDL, CSDL, where all your securities are held in dematerialized form in one place, one depository, we want to create one record where a person's all financial assets of a person are recorded in that one record, and eventually in dematerialized form. This is the way to go forward. The details are being worked out by the FSDC subcommittee. Once a subcommittee report comes and the FSDC approves that report, we will implement it. All regulators are agreed that the financial records of a person, suppose I have shares, bonds, mutual funds, bank deposits, all my financial assets must be available in one record which I can access, say, online in a depository. It's like a depository we're creating.
Okay, we'll have time for just a couple of questions. Yes, please.
Sir, after presenting so many budgets, you are leaving the economy at 4.9% GDP growth, and food inflation is still around double digits, and despite Congress President and Vice President talking about anti-graft bills, not much has been achieved. So how confident you are of coming to power once again?
We are not answering any questions about elections here, but I want to correct you on facts. Yes, growth last year was lower than expected. Growth this year has been estimated at 4.9, but when the revisions are made, I expect growth to be about 5%. But this is not the lowest that we have touched since liberalization. Just to jog your memory, the worst growth rates were recorded in 2000, 2001, and 2002, 2003. Please go back to the economic survey. Look at the GDP growth of 2000, 2001, and 2002, 2003. They were lower than 4.5%. One year it was 4.2, and another year it was 4.0. Those were the worst years of growth.
Yes, please. It's on, just speak.
Sir, your disinvestment target of 36,900 crores, just like the FY14 target of 40,000 crore, requires a big name. 40,000 crore for FY14 had Coal India in it. And we all know what happened with Coal India. So how confident are you of achieving the 36,900 crore target of disinvestment in FY15?
What happened with Coal India? I'm not unhappy. Coal India was told you'll have to disinvest. They came up with an alternative proposal. Instead of disinvestment, we will give it as special dividend. So nothing really happened in Coal India to make me unhappy or make anyone unhappy. You have to look at two entries in the budget papers. One is non-tax revenue, other is other receipts. If it is not in disinvestment, it comes as special dividend. It moves from other receipts into non-tax revenue. But as far as a finance minister is concerned, it is a sum total which is relevant to me. And I'm quite satisfied with the sum total that we have achieved under two heads, non-tax revenue and other receipts. We have set an ambitious target for disinvestment. This list includes some companies which are small companies, which are non-performing companies, which may have to be sold as companies. Therefore, these are decisions which will be taken by the interministerial group, followed by the empowered group of ministers and by the CCEA. But as I said, we have to set ambitious targets. Unless you set ambitious targets, we will not perform as well as we can.
Sir, 3 months before
Last
the
question.
Last question, please.
No. Suchetna, you had your question.
3 months before the election, the fear was that of a populist interim budget. How challenging was it to resist the temptation?
I don't yield to temptation. No, I don't yield to temptation. I do what I think is right and good given the circumstances. I have the support of the Prime Minister. I have the support of the UPA chairperson. My colleagues have been extremely cooperative this year because they know that we are going through a turbulent period. I know what other finance ministers of other countries face. I know what kind of look they have when they come and meet us. We may not be happy or satisfied with 5% growth. Certainly I'm not happy with 5% growth. But please remember, in this period of turbulence, we are one of a handful of countries whose economy is growing at 5% or above. Number one. Number two, we were least affected when the actual taper took place in December and in January. Number three, the market here, although with ups and downs, is still the best performing index of all indices of all countries over the last 10 years. I think we must give up this attitude of self-criticism, self-flagellation. The world is going through a turbulent period. We are affected by what is happening in the world. But we must be confident that we can overcome this period of turbulence and rise step by step to the goal that we have set, namely growth of 7 to 8%. I keep that clearly in mind. I don't lose faith at all. And then, keeping that goal in mind, I try to do what I believe is right, what I believe is good, and as long as I have the support of the Prime Minister, who is an eminent economist, I think we are on the right path. Thank you. Good day to all of you. Good day to all of you.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much.